Hello, everybody. Here I am on Facebook Live. I've never done this before. As many of you know, I'm a psychotherapist, and I encourage all my clients to do lots of scary things and to risk humiliation, and I tell them that I don't ask them to do anything that I don't do myself. So here's my exercise for the day to do something that is scary and risky for me. And to risk my humiliation. So today I want to talk about procrastination, and I'd love if anybody actually is watching this thing to participate and share your thoughts and questions about the subject of procrastination, because to me procrastination is just about the #1 problem that everybody brings into psychotherapy. I've been procrastinating doing this live Facebook thing for a long time, and I'm finally getting past that by doing this today. What I've come to understand about procrastination is that there are basically two types of procrastination. And to understand what those two types are, it's helpful to understand the Yerkes-Dodson law. And that law says that we have an optimal level of arousal to get us to perform at our best. If we're not aroused enough, our performance is not that good, and if we are too aroused, then our performance is not that good either. So we're looking for that optimal level of arousal, that Goldilocks level of arousal, and I think this kind of helps us understand and describe the two different kinds of procrastination. Now, for most people, the problem is too much arousal. So let me try to explain what I mean by this. Another idea that we have is the ratio theory of anxiety. And in the ratio theory of anxiety, anxiety is perceived stressor over perceived coping capacity. So if the stressor is, for example, doing this Facebook Live thing, and my perceived coping capacity is that I'm completely incapable of speaking extemporaneously on a subject like procrastination, I'm going to feel anxiety. If the perceived stressor is going out to buy a matcha tea, I'm quite capable of doing that, so it causes me no anxiety. But the key word here is perception. It's the way that we perceive what the stressor is, what the thing is we're trying to do, and the way we perceive our coping capacity. So if we feel anxious because we don't feel like we're going to succeed at doing something, then we tend to do one of two things, which is to either run away from doing it or freeze. And both of those things result in procrastination, right? I think about doing something like this, and I think, oh man, I'm really going to blow this thing. Well, why would I do it? So we sit there in our anxiety and we avoid. And it is human to avoid. People avoid all the time. In fact, I often suggest that people have two things to do, because they do one and they get to avoid the other, and that way they get to sort of fulfill both of those impulses, which is to get something done and also to avoid something else. So we avoid because we're anxious. And we're anxious because we don't feel like we are competent or like we can do the thing that we set out to do, right? And that feeling of incompetence, the word that I use to describe that is shame, where shame is the feeling that goes along with the belief that somehow I don't measure up as a human being. And for each one of us, the particular way that we don't measure up is different. I'm fat, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm unlovable. But the core feeling is the same. And when we walk around with that feeling of shame, that core feeling of not measuring up or incompetence, then that tends to drive our anxiety. On that ratio, we feel like we are not going to be able to handle whatever the stressor is. And when we feel that anxiety, we avoid. And that avoidance we can call procrastination. So that's one very basic and common and familiar form of procrastination, when we are overly aroused, too anxious, frozen, and running away. The other kind is when we are not aroused enough. And when people are on what we would call the ADD spectrum, I don't really like the diagnosis of ADD, and that'll be another conversation, talk about that. But just for shorthand purposes, when people are on that end of the spectrum, they don't really feel motivated to do things because it doesn't seem urgent. So if you need to write a school paper and you have 4 days to do it, it might as well be in the next century. There's no arousal that's saying, oh my God, I've got a deadline in 4 days. So what tends to happen with those people is that they put the project off, until the very last minute. And then, of course, then they start feeling aroused, and then they actually get the thing done, but then they don't have enough time to do it, and sometimes they go past the optimal level of arousal and they freeze because now they don't have enough time to do the project. So that's the second basic form of procrastination. So I'm curious if anybody has any questions about that. And then the big question, of course, is what do we do? What do you do about procrastination? These are deeply ingrained patterns and habits, and they're hard to change. So I'm curious if there's anybody out there, if they have anything that they want to say about this subject, any questions that they have, or what they do about their procrastination. I see that we have some people who have joined, and I don't know what I have to do to figure out what you're saying. So welcome everybody, whoever is here. It's nice to see that people are actually watching this thing. It's kind of weird being in this room by myself. I guess this is what it's like to be on the radio, right? People are listening out there, but you're all alone in your little studio. So yeah, so while I'm waiting for people to have the courage to stop procrastinating and make a comment about what they do, or ask some questions, I'll talk about some of the sort of tried and true things that people say about how you handle procrastination and what you do about it. So there was a guy named M. Scott Peck who wrote a book, if you guys remember it, if you're old enough to remember it, called The Road Less Traveled. And he starts off the book by saying that life is hard. And as soon as we accept that life is hard, it becomes less hard. And his solution for procrastination is to do the harder thing first, right? That generally what we do is we do the easier thing first, we put off the hard thing, and then it, sort of plagues us. We walk around saying, I know I really should get that done, I really should do that thing, and now you're living in a chronic state of discomfort, which of course makes you feel worse about yourself, which makes the shame worse. So if you want to turn around that negative shame spiral where you feel worse and worse about yourself, you want to create a virtuous cycle where instead of putting off the hardest thing to last, you do that hardest thing first. You do your math homework before you play your video game. And then when you get that done, you feel better about yourself, the anxiety is lifted, and then you start developing new habits in a new virtuous cycle. Now, of course, that's fantastic advice, should anybody actually take it. And it's very hard. What happens in therapy very often is I'll inspire people, and they'll be walking out of the office and they'll be saying, yes, I'm going to get that thing done. And by the time they get to the elevator, they usually forget the whole conversation that we had. And they come back the next week, and I say, so how did it go? That thing that you said you were going to do. And they look at me like children do when they're asked where their homework is when they don't have it. They have that look on their face like they're going to get, sent to the principal's office or something. It's like, and I know that, it's funny that I see, 40, 50 people a week, and I remember what the homework is, but very often they don't remember it, and it's not their fault. It's because this is the way the psyche works. And when I talk about the gremlin, we give a name to the gremlin. It's that pernicious voice inside your head that tries to undermine your progress. right? So, somebody says, I'm going to go on that diet this week, or I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go to the gym. And that gremlin says, you know what? You're not going to go to the gym. And even if you went to the gym once, you're not going to go a second time. So why even bother going the first time, right? They just, and then the person says, you know what? It's true, and you're right. There's no point in me going because I'll never go again, and I'm never going to lose the weight, and I'm never going to get in shape. So I think I'll just procrastinate for a while longer. And while I'm procrastinating, I'll go out and I'll eat a big piece of chocolate pie or something like that. So that pernicious gremlin, that gremlin of shame, very often interferes with the best plan. And I respect the gremlin. He wins most of the time. I get the person for 45 minutes a week. The gremlin gets the person for the other the rest of the 7 days. So it's very difficult to figure out a way to deal with that with that gremlin. Stop here for a little matcha tea. And again, give everybody an opportunity. Now I see comments here, and I'm just trying to. Aha. Okay, so we have a comment. So here's a person who says that they see the procrastination as being tied to ADD. And this person uses to-do lists, rewarding tasks, and medication, Concerta, which can help. All of which keeps them moving forward mostly, which is fantastic. So thanks for saying something. And that's where we get to that under-aroused type of procrastination. Now, to-do lists are great if they work for you, and very often people with ADD use to-do lists. And you talk about rewarding, and I think that is key when you have that kind of procrastination. Arthur Rubinstein, who was a great piano player, said that when he needed to practice his scales, which was a drag, he hated doing that, he would put a box of chocolates and perhaps a politically incorrect Playboy magazine on his piano stand, and he would practice the scales for 10 minutes, and then he would eat a chocolate and look at the photographs in the magazine, and that was the reward that he gave himself. And the pernicious thing about these devices, our little handheld devices, is that these are little dopamine delivery systems. We get instant reward from these things, and so that's what creates the addiction. So if we want to get over our procrastination, we need to try to figure out a way to sort of replicate what our smartphone does, but rewarding ourselves for doing the good stuff that we say that we want to or need to do. So giving yourself rewards, that positive reinforcement, is a really important part of this thing. Don't punish yourself when you don't do the stuff. Do the smallest amount that you can, take a break, and give yourself a reward. I think that's a really good technique for doing that. Let's see. I see some more comments. It says, I'm having a hard time finding that or reading that. Okay, welcome everybody who's paying attention to this. So anybody who joined late, we're talking about procrastination and your experiences with procrastination, funny stories about procrastination, or anything that you do to try to get over procrastination, or any questions that you might have about this subject. Don't, it's you can see even in this experience that maybe it's difficult to speak up. You're feeling that freeze reaction. That's one thing about let me see what happens if I press that button. No. Let's see that there. I was saying something about anxiety and freezing, but I saw another comment pipe in, and I forget what I was going to say about that. So here I am, freezing in this moment. And this is a kind of a great lesson in social anxiety, right, which is connected to the thing about procrastination, because maybe the thing that you avoid is social contact. And what are people afraid of in social contact? That they're going to get in front of somebody and they're going to freeze. Same thing with public speaking. So, and then they'll feel this feeling of humiliation come over them, and they imagine that that is intolerable. And so they avoid that. They procrastinate going out, and the longer they procrastinate, the worse things get. So what I recommend to people when they worry about this is that, first of all, I remind people that everybody is anxious, and most people are just thinking about themselves, and they're not really hey everybody. Ooh, somebody's speaking to me in Italian. Hey Nick, good to see you. So everybody's anxious, and everybody's mostly worried about themselves, and nobody goes home in the middle of the night and thinks about what somebody else said. They just worry about what they did or didn't say or anything like that. And when you freeze in a situation, instead of trying to think of what it is that you should be saying at that moment, the thing to do is to use that as a signal to let you know that you're feeling anxious. And so the thing to attend to is your feeling of anxiety. Right? So my mind went blank for a minute, and what did I do? I took some breaths, and I felt my butt in the chair, and I attended to the anxious feeling that I had instead of trying to think of the next thing to say. And as it turns out, now I'm talking again, and I found something to say, right? So that problem went away. And this is really, whatever the situation is when you are feeling anxious, it's a great technique to use. If you're afraid of going on the elevator and you avoid that, and that's the thing you procrastinate about, recognize that it's the elevator isn't the problem. The issue is your own anxiety. That's probably based on your feelings of shame. Yeah, so let me create some space here again for anybody else who has any questions or comments or things that they want to say that I can reflect on. Okay, folks, so I survived this little experiment, and I'm really, really thankful for all the people who were out there watching this thing. And I think that having dipped my toe into this water, I will be back. If anybody has any subjects that they'd like to have a conversation about or hear my thoughts on or suggestions, I'd be more than happy to respond to that. I want to do more of this and just kind of give away this information to the extent that I can on this great platform. And please feel free to contact me privately if you have any questions or thoughts that you want to share, not in this semi-public forum. And let me just say a couple of more things, and then we'll wrap it up for today. So, you know, one of the reasons that I do this work of psychotherapy, my mission is to liberate the human spirit one person at a time. And in particular, it's to liberate people's creativity. A lot of people come to see me who are blocked or stuck in terms of expressing themselves creatively. And now that I've reached this ripe age that I am, the thing that I've come to understand for myself and that I see in all the people that I work with is that they never regret the things that they did do. They regret the things that they didn't do. You know, they'll say at 40, boy, if I just would have done such and such at 30. You know, and I try to tell them, you know, when you're 50, you're going to say, I wish I did such and such at 40. Some somebody, I don't know who it was, some wise person said that the best time to have done something would have been 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. And we are afraid of the wrong thing. We're afraid of that feeling of humiliation. We're afraid of whatever that immediate thing is, but we're not nearly afraid enough of how we're going to feel at the end of our life. Life is short and it's finite. And we're not nearly afraid enough of the things that, the opportunities, the pleasures, the fun, the growth, the learning, whatever it is, the relationships that we'll miss if we don't take the risk today. So I just want to encourage everybody to feel the fear and do it anyway. I've survived this experience over the last 20 minutes. I haven't died. I got past my procrastination. And though I may cringe a little bit later, I'm basically okay. So thank you all for participating, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.